I'm Scarlett, 29, and this is how I broke free from a lifetime of chasing approval. I graduated college with honors in psychology, expecting it to be my shining moment. But at my graduation dinner, my parents' words hit like a wrecking ball: "We wish you were never born." My response? Words that hushed a restaurant and reshaped my life. If you've ever felt unloved by those closest to you, my story might hit home. Drop a comment with where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever stood up to family. I grew up in Brooklyn, a fancy Boston suburb, where our perfect colonial house and pristine lawn hid the truth. My parents, Harold and Elizabeth Johnson, seemed like the ideal upper-middle-class couple. Dad was a hotshot corporate attorney, Mom worked charity events, not for kindness but for clout. Nothing I did ever measured up. In third grade, I brought home an A-, and Dad's face fell like I'd flunked. "The Robinson girl got all A's," he said, pushing my paper back. "Do better." I nodded, choking back tears, and slipped to my room. That was my childhood, always falling short. Second place at the science fair? They'd talk about the winner and what I did wrong. Made the swim team but wasn't the fastest? Dinner was all about training harder. Someone was always better, the bar was always higher. Dad had big plans for me: doctor, lawyer, or business mogul. "Those have prestige," he'd say over Sunday roast, slicing it perfectly. "Anything less is failure." Mom was just as bad, zeroing in on my looks and friends. "Lose 10 pounds, Scarlett, and you'd be pretty," she'd say, checking her reflection. Or, "Why not befriend the Sullivan girl? Her dad's on the hospital board." Every choice, friends, clothes, my very appearance, was judged for how it made them look. Only my grandmother Evelyn, Dad's mom, truly saw me. Her warm apartment was my safe haven. "Your mind is beautiful," she'd say as we discussed books we loved. "Don't let anyone dim it." At her place, I found her old psychology books. She'd been a counselor, and our talks about emotions and behavior lit a fire in me. I was hooked. At 15, I mentioned psychology to my parents. "It's not real science," Dad scoffed. "Just nonsense." Mom agreed, "Those jobs pay nothing, darling." Still, I read psychology books in secret, stashing them under my mattress like forbidden treasure. College applications sparked our biggest fight yet. I chose psychology, ignoring their demands for pre-law or pre-med. "We won't pay for a useless degree," Dad yelled, face red. "You're meant for better." "Psychology matters," I shot back, holding my ground. "It helps people understand themselves." "People need to stop whining," he snapped. End of discussion. But it wasn't. Grandma Evelyn offered to help with tuition. "Follow your heart," she said over tea in her cozy kitchen. "Your future's yours." My parents gave in, but their disapproval hung heavy. Every holiday, they'd jab at real careers and my wasted potential. My sophomore year, Evelyn died suddenly. I was crushed, losing my only true supporter. She left me some money for tuition and a letter I still cherish: "Your compassion is your power. The world needs your heart." After her funeral, my parents' criticism sharpened. Without her buffer, I felt so alone. I dove into my studies, aiming for honors, desperate to win their approval. Anxiety ate at me, panic attacks hit before family visits, my stomach twisting at their inevitable jabs. By senior year, I had tools to cope: deep breathing, positive thoughts, and supportive friends. Still, a small part of me clung to the hope that they'd finally see me and be proud. Northeastern University changed everything, despite my parents' shadow. I met people who valued ideas without judgment. My roommate, Jennifer, a journalism major, was refreshingly blunt. "Your parents sound awful," she said after one brutal holiday story. "That's not normal, you know." Then there was Kyle, from my research class, whose humor and love for psychology matched mine. Raised in foster care, he had a fresh take on family. "Families who cares about you," he said over coffee. Not always blood. Their friendship gave me a safe space to be myself, no fear of criticism. Bit by bit, I found who I was beyond my parents' rules. I joined the Psychology Honor Society and volunteered at a crisis text line, drawn to developmental psychology, how people grow and change over time. In my junior year, I caught Dr. Rosenberg's eye, a respected psychology professor. She asked me to join her research on resilience in young adults who'd faced tough times early on. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was studying resilience while fighting to find my own. "You've got a sharp mind, Scarlett," she said after I shared early findings with her team. "Ever thought about grad school? You could do big things in this field." Her words felt like a lifeline in a desert of doubt. I poured my heart into the work, staying late in the lab, tweaking research plans, and prepping for conference talks. When Dr. Rosenberg suggested applying to the Bowman Institute in Seattle, I was thrilled but nervous. It was a top-tier research center, a dream start for my career. "They're excited about you," she told me one snowy February day in her office. "Your application stood out, and my recommendation was glowing. They want you to start in August." I sat there, gripping the offer letter, stunned, a real job at a prestigious institute, doing work I loved. It proved my path mattered, no matter what my parents thought. As graduation neared, I dove into final exams and my thesis on emotional regulation. The work was tough but rewarding. For the first time, I saw a future where I chased my passion, not someone else's dreams. 3 weeks before the big day, Mom called. I braced for her usual grilling about my plans, ready to defend my job offer. "Your father and I have been talking," she said, her voice cool and clipped. "We're coming to your graduation." I almost dropped my phone. They'd always dodge the topic, blaming busy schedules or travel hassles. "Really?" I blurted, surprised. "Of course, darling. It's a milestone. Plus, your father wants you to meet some contacts who could get you a better job than that research thing." I should have seen their ulterior motive, but hope blinded me. Maybe they'd finally respect my psychology degree and my talent. I jumped into graduation prep with fresh energy. I bought a sleek navy dress, professional yet stylish. I booked a dinner spot, scrubbed my apartment in case they visited, and practiced pitching my job offer to win them over. "They're actually coming," I told Jennifer as we tried on our graduation gowns. "Maybe things will change." She raised an eyebrow but smiled. "Just stay true to yourself," she said, fixing my cap, "no matter what they pull." That night, I lay awake, picturing Dad shaking my hand with pride, Mom giving a warm hug, saying, "We're proud of you." The dream felt so real I almost believed it. Graduation morning brought perfect New England spring vibes, sunshine on old campus buildings, a soft breeze rustling the leaves. Too nervous to sleep, I took extra time getting ready. My navy dress was pressed, my honor cords ready. "Today they'll see me," I whispered to my reflection, mascara brush shaking slightly. Jennifer poked her head in. "Your ride's here, almost valedictorian," she teased, though I was just summa cum laude. We got to the arena 2 hours early, buzzing with graduates snapping photos. I texted my parents about good seats. "We're here," Mom replied. "Your father insisted on prime spots." I saw them in the family area, Dad in a pricey charcoal suit, screaming success, Mom in a cream dress, pearls gleaming. They looked ready for a board meeting, not my graduation. "You made it," I said, forcing a hopeful smile. "Traffic was light," Dad said, glancing at his watch. "Ceremony's at 10 o'clock, right?" "I've got calls this afternoon." "No hug, no you look great or we're proud, just his schedule." "Yes, 10 o'clock, I said, my smile fading. "About 2 hours." 2 hours to walk a stage, Mom sighed. "They could just mail the diplomas." I swallowed hard. "I need to join my department. Meet me by the psychology building for photos." They nodded, and I walked off, telling myself the day wasn't over yet. The ceremony was an emotional whirlwind. Sitting with my psychology classmates, I felt pride swell as our stood. Crossing the stage, hearing summa cum laude after my name, clutching my diploma, it felt huge. I glanced at the crowd, spotting my parents in the 10th row. For a second, I thought Dad looked proud, waving slightly, but it vanished so fast I might have imagined it. After, in the chaos of graduates and families, I found them by the psychology building. Mom instantly fixed my slightly tilted cap. "Stand straight, Scarlett," she said as Dad set up his fancy camera. No one likes slouchy photos. We took the standard pictures, me with my diploma, with each parent, one family shot snapped by a passerby. Their compliments were shallow. "Well-organized event," Dad said. "Your hair looks nice pulled back," Mom added. "No congratulations or we're proud, just logistics and looks." As we headed to the parking lot, Dad caught me off guard. "Let's take you to dinner to celebrate. Le Chateau, downtown. Heard it's top-notch." Le Chateau is their kind of place, fancy, for business or anniversaries, never for me. "That sounds amazing," I said, a spark of hope igniting. Maybe this fancy dinner was their way of showing they cared, of making this moment special. "I booked us for 6:30, Dad said. "We can meet you there if you need to freshen up." "No, I'll come with you," I replied quickly, eager to keep this positive vibe. "My dress works for the restaurant, right?" I glanced at my carefully picked outfit. Mom gave me a quick look. "It's fine," she said with a slight nod I took as approval. The drive to the restaurant felt like our version of a warm chat. Dad bragged about a recent KC1, Mom talked up her next charity gala. I waited for them to ask about my job offer, my plans, but they didn't. Still, I held on to hope as we reached the restaurant's valet parking. Le Chateau lived up to its hype, glittering chandeliers, crisp white tablecloths, servers in sharp uniforms, and a quiet air of exclusivity. The maitre d' greeted Dad like an old friend. "Mr. Johnson, welcome back. Your table's ready, best spot in the house." We were seated at a corner table with a great view of the restaurant and the city lights. Dad ordered champagne without glancing at the menu, and I felt a thrill, like I was finally being seen as an adult worth celebrating. When the champagne arrived, he raised his glass. "To graduation," he said plainly, "not to me or my success, just the event." Still, I clinked glasses and sipped the pricey bubbles, savoring this rare moment of family peace. "This place is gorgeous," I said, taking in the elegance. "Thanks for bringing me." "Milestones deserve recognition," Mom replied, scanning her menu. "The foie gras is superb." For a fleeting moment, as we ordered appetizers and chatted about the decor, I let myself believe this dinner could change things. Maybe my graduation had finally shown them my worth. Maybe I'd get the validation I'd always wanted. The appetizers came, scallops for Mom, escargot for Dad, and a goat cheese salad for me. As we ate, Dad asked about other graduates. "That Sullivan girl, was she in your program?" "Martha's daughter?" "Caitlin was in business, not psychology," I said, having met her once at a mixer. "Bright girl," Dad said with a nod. "Business opens doors. She's probably got offers lined up." I saw my chance. "Actually, I've got great news about my job at the Bowman Institute, that research place." Mom cut in, flicking her fork. "What do you do there? File papers? Make coffee?" "No, Mom," I said, keeping my cool. "I'll be a research associate, working with Dr. Whitman on a study about teen emotional growth." Dad put down his fork. "And the pay? What's a research associate make these days?" I shared the salary, decent for an entry-level role. He scoffed. "Our junior paralegals earn that, and they've got room to grow." "This job has growth potential too," I pushed back. "It could lead to Scarlett," Mom interrupted. "You've put on weight since we last saw you." "Stress eating from all that studying?" "Be careful, no one respects a heavy woman in a professional job." Her sudden shift stun, a classic move to knock me off balance and take control. My face burned, but I sipped water instead of biting back. The institute's highly respected, I pressed on, determined to make them see. Its research shapes education policy nationwide. Policy, Dad sneered. Just politics and paper pushing. You could have been a surgeon or attorney, Scarlett. You had the brains, the scores. Instead, you're stuck asking people about their feelings. Our main courses arrived: filet mignon for Dad, sea bass for Mom, roasted duck for me. The food gave a brief break from their jabs, but not for long. We saw the gardeners last week, Mom said, slicing her fish. Their son's topping his class at Harvard Medical. Good for him, I said, keeping my voice even. He was in your AP classes, right? Dad asked, knowing full well he was. Same chances, but he picked something real. Their words cut deep. I'd graduated with honors, landed a job at a top institute, and was ready to start a career I loved. But to them, I'd failed by not following their path. Psychology's real, I said, struggling to stay calm. Understanding emotions and behavior matters. My research could help at-risk kids with early support. Dad sipped his wine slowly. We've been patient, Scarlett. We let you chase this hobby. We thought you'd wise up before graduation, see how you're limiting yourself. Following my passion isn't limiting, I shot back. Passion, Mom sighed, like the word was sour. Passion doesn't pay bills or build savings. Practical choices do. Their dismissals kept coming through the main course. Every defense of my career was brushed off or mocked. I felt myself shrinking, that old sense of not being enough creeping in like a chill. As the waiter cleared our plates, Dad ordered more wine without asking us. When it arrived, he raised his glass for another toast. My heart lifted a bit. Maybe, despite everything, they were proud of me in some way. I want to say something, Dad started, his voice formal, like he was addressing a boardroom. Today's the end of your education, Scarlett. It's not the path we'd have picked, but we see your effort. It wasn't glowing praise, but it was something. I lifted my glass, waiting for more. But, Dad continued, his face turning cold, we're disappointed. You could have done something meaningful with your talents. Instead, you picked a flimsy science with shaky methods. Seeing other parents today, cheering for future doctors, lawyers, or CEOs, he paused, glancing at Mom. Sometimes, we wish you'd never been born. It'd save us from explaining your poor choices to our friends. His words slammed into me like a fist. I froze, glass half raised, struggling to grasp what he'd said. Mom didn't argue or defend me, she just nodded, as if his cruelty made sense. The restaurant seemed to hush, though it was probably just my shock. A waiter with dessert menus stopped short, clearly hearing, and backed off awkwardly. Nearby diners glanced over, then away, embarrassed to witness it. I couldn't breathe. The room spun, and I gripped the table to steady myself. 22 years of their criticism and neglect boiled down to this, a blunt declaration that I was a letdown. Something inside me, stretched thin for years, snapped. But instead of crumbling, a clear strength rose through the pain. They'd never see me, never value me. I'd wasted too long chasing love they couldn't give. Silence hung heavy at our table. Dad sipped his wine casually, as if he hadn't just crushed me. Mom fiddled with her napkin, avoiding my eyes. The restaurant's chatter resumed, but curious glances lingered. I set my glass down, calm despite the storm inside. My hands, steady against all odds, placed my napkin by my plate. I stood slowly. My parents looked up, Dad annoyed, Mom confused. Scarlett, dinner's not over, she said, missing the point. I faced them, the people who gave me life but never saw me. My voice was steady, surprising me. If that's your wish, then pretend I was never born. Live as if you never had a daughter named Scarlett. The restaurant went dead quiet. A spoon clattered somewhere, loud in the stillness. From now on, I went on, you don't have to justify my choices to anyone. You're free from the burden of a daughter who chose her own path over yours. Dad's face reddened. You're causing a scene, Scarlett. Sit down now. No, I said firmly. Not today, not ever again. For 22 years, I've chased your approval, your love. Now I see it was never possible, not because I wasn't enough, but because you couldn't give it. I grabbed my clutch. Thanks for dinner and the clarity. I'll never be enough for you, but I'm more than enough for me. I walked out, head high, tears prickling but held back. Every eye followed me, but I didn't care, not about the diners, the staff, or my parents. In the parking lot, my strength broke. My hands shook so much I couldn't start the car. Sobs hit hard, bending me over the steering wheel. Years of seeking validation, striving for perfection, hoping to be enough, it all spilled out there. After what felt like forever but was probably 15 minutes, I calmed enough to drive. I went straight to Jennifer's apartment. She opened the door, saw my tear-streaked face, and hugged me tight without a word. They said they wish I'd never been born, I whispered into her shoulder. They don't deserve you, she said fiercely, leading me to her couch. Not one bit. I sank onto the sofa as she made tea, the weight of it all hitting me. My phone buzzed with texts and calls from my parents. I checked it to silence it, messages piled up, you're overreacting. That was childish and embarrassing. Call us now to discuss your behavior. No apology, no hint they saw their words' cruelty, just blame and demands, as always. Jennifer brought tea, snatched my phone, and read the texts, her face hardening. Unreal, she muttered, flipping it face down. No calls back tonight. She called Kyle, who showed up with ice cream and a protective vibe that made me cry again, this time from gratitude. These two, with no ties of blood or duty, cared more in one night than my parents ever had. We talked late into the night about what happened and what came next. They didn't downplay my pain or push empty promises about family fixing itself. They backed my right to shield myself from more hurt. Stay as long as you need, Jennifer said. This couch is yours. I fell asleep around 3 a.m., drained but oddly peaceful. For the first time, I'd stood up for myself fully, no regrets, no compromises. Morning light poured through Jennifer's windows, my phone showing 37 missed calls and texts. I skimmed them, my parents swung from demanding apologies for my scene to guilt trips that grew desperate overnight. In the clear light of day, I saw it, they had no hold over me anymore. I had my degree, my job offer, my choices. Their only grip was emotional, and I could break it. On Jennifer's couch, still in my Navy graduation dress, I made a life-changing choice. I'd take the Seattle job, move across the country, and live as if my parents didn't exist, not out of anger, but to protect and grow myself. I need to vanish from their lives, I told Jennifer when she came out of her room. Completely. It's my only path to freedom. She nodded, getting it instantly. We'll make it happen, she said. The next week was a blur of action. I confirmed my start date at the Bowman Institute, August 1st, just 6 weeks away. Jennifer and Kyle helped me plan a clean break from my parents. I changed my phone number, sharing it only with close friends and work contacts. I set email filters to divert my parents' messages to a hidden folder. I shut down my social media and started fresh with new accounts under tweaked names, locked tight. My lease was ending soon, so I sped up my move. Jennifer and Kyle packed my apartment into boxes, stashing them in Kyle's garage. I sold my furniture, keeping just books, clothes, and essentials for my car. You sure about driving cross-country alone? Jennifer asked, sealing a box. I need the road to clear my head, I said. 3,000 miles to a fresh start. The toughest part was cutting financial ties. I had a joint bank account from my teens. I opened a new one elsewhere, transferred my share, and sent a check returning every cent my parents gave me since Grandma's death, with a note, "This settles all debts between us." My parents kept trying to reach me, first with fury, then fake worry about my mental state, then threats of a missing person report, though they knew where I was. Their messages showed their real concern, not me, but their image. "Your father had to dodge questions at the club," Mom wrote in one email that slipped through. "Your actions embarrass us." I ignored it, focusing on my Seattle plans. I researched safe, affordable neighborhoods, studied the city's transit, and dug into the Bowman Institute's projects. A week after graduation, Jennifer, Kyle, and I packed my Honda Civic. Boxes filled the trunk and back seat, leaving space for a small bag up front. "Take this emergency credit card," Jennifer said, handing it to me. "From both of us, just in case." Kyle gave me a sealed envelope. "Open it in Seattle," he said. I hugged them, tears welling. "I can't thank you enough." "Just live well," Jennifer said. "That's thanks enough." The cross-country drive was my therapy. Each mile distanced me from my past. I stayed in budget motels, ate at roadside diners, and watched the scenery shift from Northeast familiarity to Midwest plains, through mountains, to Pacific Northwest green. I thought about family, what it should be versus what mine was, my future, what I wanted, not what was demanded, and healing, how to move on without rejection's weight. Seattle greeted me with drizzle and stunning mountain views. My Capitol Hill studio was simple but mine, free of others' expectations. I furnished it with thrift store finds, colorful pillows, and shelves of psychology books and novels my parents would have scoffed at. On my first day at the Bowman Institute, I opened Kyle and Jennifer's envelope. The card read, "Family loves you for you. We're your family forever." Inside was a silver phoenix necklace, symbolizing rebirth from ashes. I wore it that day, feeling its strength as I walked the Institute's halls. Dr. Whitman, my boss, was a sharp woman in her 50s with kind eyes. "Scarlett Johnson," she said, scanning my file. "Summa cum laude," glowing praise from Dr. Rosenberg. "I expect great things." "I won't let you down," I vowed. The work was tough but rewarding. I designed research plans, interviewed participants, analyzed data, and helped write papers for top journals. For once, my brains and effort were valued, not ignored. Outside work, I built a new circle. Sophia, my neighbor with a bright laugh, pulled me into her book club. There, I met Marcus, an English teacher with calm confidence and kind eyes. They didn't know my past, and I loved being seen as who I was now, not the daughter who fell short. 6 months passed with no word from my parents. They stopped calling my old number and emailing when I didn't reply. A family friend said they claimed I had a post-graduation breakdown and needed time to sort things out. Their real worry? How my absence looked to their social crowd. I started therapy with Dr. Landon, a family trauma expert. Our sessions hurt but helped. "What your parents said was emotional abuse," she said plainly. "It's part of a lifelong pattern." "I feel guilty for cutting them off," I confessed. "That's normal for kids of emotionally distant parents," she said. "I used to think it was my job to keep my parents happy, to make sure they were comfortable. But they were the ones who should have been looking out for me." With Dr. Landon's help, I started to see how their treatment shaped me, my perfectionism, my anxiety, my habit of apologizing for existing. Spotting these patterns was the first step to breaking free from them. My first holiday season away from family hit me hard. Thanksgiving and Christmas were never cozy at home, but they were familiar. Now, I was alone, 3,000 miles from anyone I'd known for long. Sophia noticed I was down as November rolled in. "First holidays are tough," she said, without me explaining. "Join my family for Thanksgiving. Mom cooks for a crowd, and we don't pry." I went, grateful, and found myself in a warm, chaotic gathering, nothing like the stiff, tense meals of my childhood. Sophia's parents bickered playfully about turkey carving, her brothers swapped embarrassing stories, and her grandma pushed seconds on everyone. No one asked about my family or why I was there. For Christmas, Marcus invited me to Misfit Christmas with friends who, like me, weren't with family. We swapped small, thoughtful gifts, played board games, and sang off-key carols. It wasn't flawless, but it felt real. I was starting to build my own traditions, my own people. Work at the Institute was going great. After just a year, I got promoted to research coordinator, more responsibility, better pay. I made friends who liked me for me, not my past. 2 years after graduating, I stood on my new apartment's balcony, a big step up from my old studio, staring at Seattle's skyline. I wore the Phoenix necklace from Jennifer and Kyle, my loyal friends despite the distance. We video chatted often, and they'd visited once. "You seem stronger," Jennifer said during their visit. "I am," I told her. "I'm becoming who I was meant to be." On that balcony, 2 years after that life-changing dinner, I realized something huge. By wishing I'd never been born, my parents had accidentally freed me to become the person I chose to be, not the one they wanted to mold. An email from my father popped up on a random Tuesday, 2.5 years after I left Le Chateau and their lives behind. The subject? "We need to talk." He'd found my work email on the Bowman Institute's website. It was short: "Your mother and I are in Seattle next weekend for a conference. Let's meet. Name a time and place." No sorry, no mention of the past, just their usual expectation that I'd obey. My heart raced as I stared at the screen, unsure if I should reply. My new life in Seattle felt fragile, like their presence could break it. I sent the email to Dr. Landon right away, my fingers trembling slightly on the keyboard as I typed out a quick plea for an urgent session that very night. The words blurred on the screen for a moment, my mind racing back to the shock of seeing my father's message in my inbox. How had he found my work email? It felt like an invasion, a reminder that even 3,000 miles away, their reach could still touch me. But I pushed that thought aside and hit send, hoping Dr. Landon had an opening. She responded within minutes, fitting me in at 7 p.m. after her last regular appointment. As I walked into her cozy office, the familiar scent of lavender from her diffuser hit me, grounding me a little. I sank into the soft armchair, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, nerves buzzing like electricity under my skin. "You don't owe them anything," she said gently, her voice steady and reassuring as she settled across from me. "Your boundaries matter, Scarlett. You've worked so hard to establish them." "I know," I replied, my voice quieter than I intended, laced with the uncertainty that had been building since the email arrived. "But if I avoid them now, it feels like they still control me. Like I'm still that scared girl running away from their disapproval." The words hung in the air, heavy with the truth I'd been unpacking in therapy for years. Dr. Landon nodded, her eyes full of empathy, not judgment. We dove right in, talking through my options one by one, what could happen if I met them, what might unfold if I didn't. She helped me map it out, like we were strategizing a battle plan. Ignoring the email entirely could give me peace, but it might leave a nagging shadow, a what-if that could erode my confidence. Meeting them head-on, though, carried risks, old wounds reopening, their words trying to pull me back into that toxic dynamic. "The key is protection," she emphasized. "If you meet them, do it your way, a public place to keep things neutral, a short time limit so you can exit gracefully, clear rules up front, and support ready right after. Have friends on standby, someone to debrief with." By the end of the session, my heart rate had slowed, and I felt armed with clarity. Walking home under the Seattle streetlights, the cool evening air brushing my face, I replayed her words. This wasn't about giving in, it was about reclaiming power. I decided to respond, but on my terms. The next morning, I crafted the email carefully, keeping it brief and firm. "I'll meet you at Westlake Coffee Shop, Saturday at 11 a.m. I can stay for 30 minutes only." I hit send before I could second-guess myself, a small surge of empowerment rushing through me. The coffee shop was perfect, bustling enough to feel safe in public, but with quiet corners for conversation. Plus, it was just a short walk from Marcus's apartment, where I planned to head straight after, like a safety net waiting to catch me. I filled Sophia and Marcus in over lunch that day, my voice steady as I explained the plan. They listened without interrupting, their concern evident but supportive. "We've got your back," Sophia said, squeezing my hand. "Text us if anything feels off." Marcus nodded, adding, "And come over right after. I'll have tea ready, or something stronger if you need it." Their unwavering friendship wrapped around me like a warm blanket, reminding me I wasn't alone in this. As Saturday approached, I prepared meticulously. I chose my outfit with intention: charcoal gray slacks that made me feel professional and put together, a soft blue silk blouse that brought out my eyes and boosted my confidence, and the phoenix necklace from Jennifer and Kyle dangling against my chest, a talisman of rebirth and strength. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early, my pulse quickening as I scanned the room. I picked a corner table with a clear view of the door, ordering a simple black coffee to steady my hands. The aroma of fresh grounds filled the air, mingling with the chatter of patrons, creating a buffer of normalcy around me. At exactly 11 o'clock, they walked in, punctual as always. They looked older than in my memories, lines etched deeper around their eyes, but otherwise unchanged. Dad in his expensive business casual ensemble, probably tailored and costing more than my rent, striding with that purposeful gait that used to intimidate me. Mom beside him, elegant in a designer dress and her signature pearl necklace, her posture perfect. They spotted me immediately, weaving through the tables toward me. "Scarlett," Dad said, extending his hand as if this were a corporate negotiation rather than a family reunion. "You look well." His voice was formal, detached. I shook his hand briefly, the contact feeling foreign, and stayed seated, ignoring the subtle lean from Mom that hinted at a hug. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the chairs across from me, keeping the table as a barrier. "Would you like coffee?" "We already ordered at the counter," Mom replied, her eyes scanning me from head to toe with that critical gaze I knew so well. "You've lost weight." It was her opening line, typical, focusing on appearance rather than anything deeper. I felt a flicker of the old irritation, but I breathed through it, refusing to let it derail me. I jumped right in, no time for superficial chit-chat. "How did you get my work email?" My tone was even, direct. Mom waved a hand vaguely. "Your father has connections." Of course, he always did, pulling strings in his professional world. "We've been trying to reach you for some time," she added, as if it were my fault for the silence. I wasn't hiding, I countered calmly. I simply chose not to be in contact. The words landed, creating an uncomfortable silence that stretched between us like a taut wire. Dad cleared his throat, breaking it. "Your behavior has been extremely distressing to your mother. The way you left that dinner, cutting off all contact, it was immature and hurtful." Anger bubbled up inside me, hot and familiar, but I held it in check, drawing on the breathing exercises Dr. Landon had taught me. "Do you remember what you said to me at that dinner?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm within. He waved his hand dismissively, as if swatting away an annoyance. "Everyone says things they don't mean in the heat of the moment." But I wasn't letting him off that easily. "You told me you wished I'd never been born," I stated plainly, the words tasting bitter even now. That wasn't the heat of the moment. That was the culmination of a lifetime of criticism and conditional love, love with strings attached, only given when I met your standards. Mom interjected quickly, her voice sharp. "You're exaggerating, Scarlett. We've always wanted what's best for you." I shook my head, meeting her eyes. "No," I corrected firmly. "You've always wanted what you think is best for yourselves, a daughter who reflects well on you, who makes choices you can brag about to your friends, not a daughter who's authentic and happy on her own terms." Just then, the barista called out their names, the interruption slicing through the tension. Dad stood to retrieve their drinks, leaving Mom and me alone for a moment. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This little rebellion has gone on long enough, Scarlett. People are asking questions. Your father's had to make excuses at his firm. It reflects poorly on us." There it was, laid bare, their true concern. Not my happiness, not my well-being, but their polished image, cracked by my absence. It stung, but it also validated everything I'd come to understand in therapy. When Dad returned, balancing their elaborate coffee drinks, lattes with foam art, no doubt, he set them down with a clink. I took a deep breath and decided to cut even deeper to the core. Why are you really here? What do you want from me? They exchanged a quick glance, a silent communication honed over decades of marriage. We want things to go back to normal, Dad said finally, his tone measured. Family should be in contact. The holidays have been awkward without you. Awkward. The word echoed in my mind, revealing so much. Awkward, I repeated slowly, letting it sink in. Not sad or incomplete, just awkward. He backtracked hastily. That's not what I meant. I think it's exactly what you meant, I replied, my voice gaining strength. And that's the problem. I was never a full person to you, just an extension of yourselves, a reflection of your expectations and status. When I chose my own path, my own career, my own life, I became an inconvenience, an embarrassment that disrupted your perfect narrative. They looked taken aback, their expressions shifting from confidence to surprise, as if this perspective had truly never crossed their minds. It was almost sad, seeing how insulated they'd been in their own world. I've built a life here, I continued, the words flowing now with conviction. A good life, a real one. I have friends who value me for who I am, not for what I achieve or how I perform. I have work that matters to me, that makes a difference in the world, helping kids build emotional resilience. And most importantly, I have peace, something I never had growing up under your roof. We're still your parents, Dad interjected, his voice carrying that old authority, the one that used to make me shrink back instantly. But not anymore. Biology made you my parents, I acknowledged, keeping my gaze level. But you chose not to be my family. Family supports each other through thick and thin. Family accepts differences without judgment. Family loves unconditionally, without tallying scores or imposing conditions. You did none of those things for me. As I spoke, I saw Mom's eyes fill with tears, the first genuine emotion I'd witnessed from her in years, not the performative sighs or dramatic gestures I remembered from childhood arguments. We do love you, Scarlett, in our way, she said softly, her voice cracking just a bit. Your way was harmful, I responded gently, not wanting to crush her but needing her to hear the truth. It took me years of therapy to unpack that, to understand that I'm worthy of love exactly as I am, not for my achievements, my compliance, or how well I fit into your mold, but simply for being me, flaws and all. Dad shifted in his seat, uncomfortable, muttering under his breath, therapy. Always looking for someone to blame. It was a classic deflection, one I'd heard before whenever vulnerability threatened his control. I'm not blaming you for who you are, I clarified, my tone even. I'm holding you accountable for your actions, the words, the expectations, the emotional neglect, and protecting myself from further harm. That's my right. I glanced at my watch, 20 minutes had slipped by already. I have 10 minutes left. If there's anything meaningful you want to say, now's the time. My directness seemed to unsettle them completely. They had come expecting the compliant daughter they'd molded for so long, or perhaps an explosive confrontation they could dismiss as my emotional instability. But my calm, reasoned clarity? It left them without their usual scripts, fumbling in the unfamiliar territory of equality. After a long, awkward pause, during which the coffee shop's ambient noise filled the void, Dad finally spoke. What would it take to re-establish contact? It was a transactional question, straight from his business playbook, but at least it was honest, a crack in the facade. I didn't hesitate. First, a genuine acknowledgement of the harm done, not just at that dinner, but throughout my life, the constant criticism that chipped away at my self-worth. I counted them off on my fingers, making it clear. Second, respect for my boundaries and choices going forward, no more judgments on my career or life decisions. Third, a willingness to build a new relationship based on mutual respect, not authority and obedience where you dictate and I follow. And if we can't meet those conditions? Mom asked quietly, her tears now drying, leaving her looking vulnerable. Then we remain as we are, I replied simply. I'll continue my life without you in it, thriving on my own. The choice is yours now. They sat there, stunned by this reversal of power. For the first time in our shared history, I was the one setting the terms, not begging for scraps of approval. As the 30-minute mark approached, I stood up, gathering my things with deliberate calm. I have to go. I have plans with friends. The words felt liberating, a reminder that my world extended far beyond them. Can we contact you again? Mom asked hesitantly, her voice small. I paused, then pulled a napkin from the dispenser and jotted down my personal email. Sliding it across the table, I said, "This is the only contact information I'm comfortable sharing right now. If you decide you can meet my conditions, you can reach me here. But please understand, I won't respond to manipulation, guilt trips, or demands. That's non-negotiable." I walked out of the coffee shop, the bell tinkling behind me as the door closed. The fresh air hit my face, and I felt unexpectedly light, as if a weight I'd carried for years had lifted. There had been no dramatic reconciliation, no flood of tearful apologies or instant promises of change. But I'd spoken my truth calmly and clearly, without apology or rage, and for once, they'd been forced to listen, really listen, to my voice. Marcus was waiting at his apartment, just as promised, with a spread of comfort food, grilled cheese sandwiches, tomato soup, and a pint of my favorite ice cream. He didn't push me to talk right away. Instead, he handed me a mug of herbal tea and let me settle on the couch, the cozy space filled with books and plants that always made me feel at home. When I finally opened up, recounting the conversation bit by bit, he listened attentively, his presence a quiet anchor. "Are you okay?" he asked when I finished, his eyes searching mine. Surprisingly, yes, I replied, a small smile breaking through. For so long, I was afraid of confronting them, terrified that they still had some invisible power over me, that their words could pull me back into that cycle of doubt. But they don't. Not anymore. I walked away on my terms, and that changes everything. In the months that followed my tense coffee shop meeting with my parents, their attempts at communication trickled in, hesitant and imperfect. The first came in the form of an email from Dad, landing in my inbox on a quiet Wednesday evening. The subject line was a bland checking in, but the message itself felt like a small earthquake. His words were awkward, almost stilted, as he wrote that perhaps they'd been overly critical at times, a tiny admission that cracked the polished armor of their usual defensiveness. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was more than I'd ever gotten before. I sat at my kitchen table, rereading it under the soft glow of a lamp, my heart caught between skepticism and a flicker of hope. Then, a few weeks later, a birthday card arrived in the mail, its pastel envelope standing out among the usual bills and junk flyers. Inside was a gift certificate to a local bookstore and a note from Mom, her handwriting as precise as ever. "Proud of your dedication," it read, stiff and formal, like a greeting card template she couldn't deviate from. I turned the card over in my hands, tracing the embossed flowers, searching for something deeper in her words. It wasn't the heartfelt reconciliation I'd once dreamed of as a kid, but it showed a glimmer of effort, a sign they were at least trying to understand what I needed, even if they weren't fully capable of giving it yet. I held my boundaries like a lifeline, responding only to these small, genuine gestures. When an email arrived hinting at family obligations for the holidays, with its familiar undertone of guilt and control, I let it sit unanswered in my inbox. I'd learned to spot manipulation from a mile away, and I wasn't going back to that dance of appeasement. Sometimes weeks passed without any contact at all, and I was surprised by how okay I felt about it. The silence didn't sting like it used to, it wasn't punishment anymore. It was space, room to breathe, to live without the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. For the first time, whatever relationship we had left existed on my terms, not theirs. That shift felt like stepping into sunlight after years in a storm, a profound freedom that made my chest feel lighter. Meanwhile, my life in Seattle was blooming in ways I couldn't have imagined just a few years ago, when I'd been a nervous newcomer in a city far from everything familiar. My research on emotional resilience in adolescence, a project I'd poured my heart into, was accepted for publication in a major psychology journal. I'll never forget the moment the email arrived. I was at my desk at the Bowman Institute, surrounded by scattered notes and a half-empty coffee mug, when the notification pinged. My heart raced as I opened it, scanning the words "accepted for publication" over and over to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I rushed to share the news with my team, and we celebrated over coffee at a nearby cafe, clinking mugs and laughing about the late nights that had led to this moment. It wasn't just a professional milestone, it was proof that the path I'd chosen, against my parents' wishes, was leading somewhere meaningful, somewhere that mattered. My friendships deepened too, becoming the kind of chosen family I'd always longed for. Sophia and I started a weekly hiking ritual, lacing up our boots to explore the lush, misty trails around Seattle. We'd trek through fern-covered paths in Discovery Park or climb the slopes of Mount Si, our conversations weaving between work stresses, silly anecdotes, and big dreams for the future. Out there, with the scent of pine and damp earth filling my lungs, I felt free to be myself, sensitive, introspective, sometimes a little messy, and Sophia embraced it all. She saw my sensitivity as a strength, not a flaw to be fixed, and her acceptance helped me see it that way too. With Marcus, our connection grew into something deeper, more intimate, but never rushed. We built our relationship on mutual respect, open communication, and a quiet kind of affection that felt like coming home. We savored simple moments, cooking dinner together in his cozy apartment, the kitchen filled with the aroma of garlic and herbs, or watching the sunset from his balcony, the sky streaking orange and pink over Puget Sound. Each moment reinforced a truth I'd struggled to believe for so long: I deserved this kind of love, the kind that didn't demand I change or perform to earn it. Marcus's steady presence, his way of listening without judgment, became an anchor in my life, grounding me as I navigated the choppy waters of healing. Healing wasn't a straight line, of course. There were still days when old insecurities crept in, uninvited guests whispering doubts in my ear. Was I really enough? Did I need to achieve more, be more, to prove my worth? On those days, I'd pull out my journal, filling pages with raw, unfiltered thoughts until the noise in my head quieted. Sometimes I'd call Dr. Landon for a check-in, her calm voice guiding me back to the truths I'd worked so hard to internalize. "You're not that girl anymore," she'd remind me, and I'd nod, even though she couldn't see me through the phone. Those tough moments were growing rarer, spaced further apart as I learned to trust my own value, independent of anyone else's approval or expectations. Each time I pushed through, I felt a little stronger, a little more rooted in who I was becoming. 3 years after that devastating graduation dinner, the night when my parents' words, "We wish you were never born," had shattered me like fragile glass, I stood at a podium at a national psychology conference in Chicago. The room was packed with colleagues, students, and experts, their faces attentive and engaged, a stark contrast to the judgmental stares I'd grown up dodging. I presented my research on emotional validation in adolescent development, weaving together data and personal insights with a confidence I barely recognized as my own. My voice was steady, my slides clear, and as I spoke, I caught sight of the phoenix pendant resting against my collarbone, its silver glinting under the stage lights. I smiled faintly, struck by its symbolism. That dinner, held at an upscale restaurant where I'd expected celebration but found rejection, had been a crucible, a moment of fire that burned away the version of me who sought approval at every turn. The journey from that night to this podium had been long and often painful, paved with tears, countless therapy sessions, and hard-won self-discoveries that forced me to confront my deepest fears. But like the phoenix of legend, I'd risen from those ashes, transformed into someone stronger, more authentic, and unapologetically myself. Those cruel words, meant to destroy me, had instead ignited a spark, a fire that fueled my determination to forge my own destiny, free from their constraints. Now, I share a simple but powerful truth with the teens in my research studies, the ones navigating their own storms of self-doubt and family pressures: your worth is inherent, woven into the very fabric of who you are. It's not something you have to earn by being perfect, pleasing others, or meeting impossible standards. Your value doesn't hinge on someone else's ability, or inability, to see it and affirm it. And sometimes, the family you choose, the one built on genuine love and unconditional acceptance, becomes far more important than the family you were born into, with all its tangled complications and conditions. I think about those teens often, their wide eyes, their quiet nods as I share my findings and my story. They're at the age where the world can feel like a maze of expectations, where family dynamics can either lift them up or weigh them down. I tell them about my phoenix necklace, about how it reminds me that even the worst moments can lead to rebirth. I tell them about the hikes with Sophia, the dinners with Marcus, the moments of triumph at work, proof that life can be built on your own terms, even after pain. Sometimes, I'll get an email from one of those teens after a workshop, their words tentative but hopeful, sharing how they set a boundary with a parent or stood up for what they believed in. Those messages hit me hard, reminding me why I do this work. It's not just about research or publications, it's about showing others that they can find their own path, just as I did. That they can choose who they want to be, no matter what voices, internal or external, try to hold them back. My parents' efforts at connection continued sporadically over those months, each one a small test of my resolve. Another email came from Dad a few weeks after my birthday, this one a bit longer, mentioning a colleague who'd praised my institute's work. It felt like a backhanded compliment, a nod to my success only because it reflected well on him. I didn't respond to that one, it carried too much of the old dynamic, where my worth was tied to their pride. But when Mom sent a short note asking about my research, no strings attached, I replied with a brief update, keeping it neutral but open. It was a delicate balance, letting them in just enough without compromising the boundaries I'd fought so hard to establish. I leaned on my community during those moments of uncertainty. Sophia and I would debrief over coffee at our favorite spot, a quirky cafe with mismatched chairs and the best chai in Seattle. She'd listen as I vented about the latest email or card, offering perspective with her trademark blend of humor and wisdom. Marcus, too, was a steady presence, always ready with a hug or a distraction, whether it was a board game night with friends or a quiet evening watching old sci-fi movies. Their support reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I'd built a network of people who saw me for me. As the seasons changed, Seattle's gray skies giving way to bursts of spring color, I felt my life settling into a rhythm that was entirely my own. Work at the Institute grew more demanding but also more rewarding, with new projects on the horizon and a team that felt like a second family. My research wasn't just numbers and theories, it was a lifeline for kids who needed to hear that their emotions mattered, that their struggles were valid. Every time I presented my findings or mentored a young intern, I felt a piece of my own healing click into place. Looking back, I see how far I've come since that night 3 years ago, when my parents' words threatened to define me. I could have let them break me, could have carried their rejection like a permanent scar. Instead, I chose to rebuild, to rise, to become someone they couldn't dictate or diminish. The Phoenix necklace, a gift from friends who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, became my talisman, a reminder that transformation is possible, even after devastation. If you're reading this and you've ever had to set boundaries with family who couldn't accept your choices, your true self, I want you to know you're not alone. It's hard, messy work, but it's worth it. Share your story below, your voice might be the encouragement someone else needs to take that first step. If this resonated, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about finding strength through tough family dynamics and personal growth. And if you know someone who needs to hear they're enough, share this with them. It could be the spark that lights their own fire. Thank you for being here, for listening to my story. And always remember, you are worthy of love, exactly as you are, no strings attached.